my video. So I'm hoping you can see me. Oh, I'm back. Okay. Well, I think we're going to have some of these little glitches along the way, folks. So please bear with us. We're all working remotely. And I want to thank everyone at South Shore Association of Realtors, not only for getting me on to speak with you this morning, but for making all the turn behind the scenes, and they're going to help me out with this, the video and the PowerPoint movement. So again, bear with us. We're definitely able to take all of your questions, and please type them in and we'll try to answer them as best we can. So insurance in the age of COVID-19, who knew we'd be talking about something like this? Unfortunately, we are, with so many different ramifications. And Stephanie, if you don't mind moving the slide along here. You know, it's just a rapidly growing series of events here that make things different and new every single day. Stephanie, can you hear me to move this PowerPoint along? Jean? Okay, there we go. Thank you. All right, thanks. So, you know, we have to start. We're talking about insurance and coverage and what works and what doesn't. So we're going to start with just some really basic stuff, because it's important to understand how this all works to see if you have coverage. We're getting so many questions about, am I covered for this? Am I covered for that? What should I do? What can I say? So let's start with the basics. You know, typically real estate firms have three kinds of policies. They have their errors and omissions policies, which cover their professional services. In other words, the contracts you sign, professional services that you provide in terms of doing showings and open houses, and disclosure forms, and all of the things that you do on a professional contractual basis. Sometimes those policies also extend coverage to bodily injury, property damage. If you see BIPD, that means bodily injury and property damage to another party. Sometimes these policies may also give you some type of data protection or wire fraud coverage. But basically, they're there for protection in your professional services. Most firms also have what's called a business owner policy, or a BOP. This can also be referred to as general liability insurance. So this covers, in a lot of ways, bodily injury and property damage for another person. So if you bring somebody to a showing and they slip and fall on a wet floor, you forget to lock up afterwards and the property becomes damaged by the weather, or an animal gets in, or it's vandalized or something like that. It covers loss of business property. So if an office is broken into and your computers and so on are stolen, or a laptop stolen out of your car. One of the biggest things it covers in terms of what these are now, a business interruption and extra expense. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But if your business is interrupted because you cannot provide your service and therefore you're losing money, is there coverage for that or not under this interruption language in the policy? And then workers' compensation, which typically we wouldn't talk about because that's kind of cut and dry, but now it's certainly a bigger issue when employees independent contractors may be exposed to a whole different type of risk with the COVID-19. So coverage interpretations, believe me, are being impacted by COVID-19 rulings, legislation, regulation, real life events. So let's move on to the next slide. So there are three tests for coverage. You know, people say, am I covered? Well, okay, there are three things that the insurance companies are going to look at to determine if there's coverage. What does the policy give you? What does the policy language grant to you in terms of coverage? I always joke, you know, I'm sure you've all read your policies, and I'm sure everyone has read their policy, so they know exactly what we're talking about here. What coverage does a policy grant? Then what does it take away with the exclusions? Okay, because not everything is covered. No policy is comprehensive. You've heard me say that before. So the policy gives you stuff, then it takes away stuff, and then maybe it gives you back via an endorsement to the policy. So if that doesn't confuse the heck out of everybody, then I don't know, because it confuses us all the time. So what are the things that we have to worry about here? Let's start going down the list and jumping into this a little bit. Your inability to perform what you said and agreed to do, okay? There may be shelter in place orders, there may be essential versus non-essential workers, they may be, these days, a lot of different reasons why you can or cannot do something. Does that negate the contract that you signed with the client and they signed with you? We don't know yet. We don't know yet because none of the stuff has really been litigated. And right now, everybody is focused on, as they should be, on safety and survival and health. It's really not about contracts so much right now, but believe me, it will be a big issue very shortly. So you sign a contract, and what's your responsibility on your ability or inability to perform to those requirements in the contract? What does the client expect? Do they really care? Are they going to demand things of you that you may not be able to do or are uncomfortable doing? What about the lenders or the other broker? You know, what are they making you feel pressured about doing or not doing? Okay, so there's a lot of factors at work here that affect your ability or inability to meet your contractual liabilities. What about state and governmental shutdowns and mandates? We know recently that in Massachusetts, real estate agents have been deemed as essential workers, which is a good thing in a lot of ways. There's different implications to that. Appraisers deemed essential workers. Recently, title agents have been deemed as essential workers as well. So, you know, there's a lot of opportunity for things to continue and for the wheels to still turn in the real estate world, at least as far as you being considered essential. But here's all these things that, you know, factor in. What about, you know, language around smoke alarm inspections, which I think MAR has given some language to, but again, how does that work out in the long run? Evictions have been suspended in Massachusetts. But what about rent collection? You know, what are your liabilities there? What are your liabilities for property management and your duty to the property owner? So these are all things that, you know, if you're doing any of these things, you really have to look at your individual contract and really talk to the people at the other side of that contract to determine what the expectations really are. And of course, you know, in writing, you know, is there any forgiveness on the part of the property owner to forgive the monthly maintenance? I was going to say grass cutting, but I guess it's a little too early in the year. But you know what I'm saying in terms of examples for that. Is there forgiveness there to meet some of those contractual obligations? And if you're obligated to rent properties on behalf of the property owner, and we know that now short-term rentals are banned in Massachusetts, does that relieve you of your contractual liabilities? Again, something we're looking at, something to think about, something to keep your eye on. And this one, we know is going to come back to haunt everybody. Those who've heard me talk before know that I tell everybody that disclosure issues are the largest and biggest form of E&O claims by like 3 to 1 or 4 to 1. So now we have a whole new disclosure concern, and that's a contamination of the property and use of the property. And that includes future viability. If you're involved in the sale of a commercial property, for example, or even the renting or leasing of a commercial property, and that contract is based on, receipts and expectations around commerce and the type of business monies that are going to be flowing through the business, and all of a sudden that business is closed. How does that affect the purchase and sale agreement, for example? So as you'll become frustrated with me during this whole conversation, I'm really going to ask a lot of questions that we're just trying to figure out what the answers are to, but I want you to know what the questions are because you have to address them. You know, really can't ignore them. So if we can move to the next slide, please. I did this the other day, and I said, please don't kill the messenger. So please don't. So moving on to, the topic still of properties where you're managing them, you show open houses, you're showing them. Here's some basic tenets. If your firm, and we're talking about the firm here, and of course the agent acting on behalf of the firm, if your firm is holding an open house, you legally assume care, custody, and control of the property. Okay, care, custody, and control. Those are big words because it means that you're pretty much responsible for that property during the open house. That includes the safety of visitors, the safety of occupants, as well as the safety, so to speak, of the property, keeping the property viable, clean, and safe. In the old days, pre-COVID, again, we talk about water on the floor or window left open, or, someone sneaking into the bedroom and stealing jewelry or something like that. Now we're talking about, disease and viruses left on a doorknob or a countertop. So the care, custody, and control assumes a whole different meaning these days. And it implies, again, maintaining the property in a clean and healthy way. So what insurance coverage relates to open houses and managed properties and so on? Again, going back to that bodily injury, property damage. What do the policies say? Well, they don't say anything that's really helpful or positive. And I'm talking very generically here, not to any type of company or insurance policy that you might or might not have, or an insurance company might or might not offer. But in general, bodily injury coverage excludes, really, almost in all cases, coverage for viruses, bacteria, pollutants. And if it doesn't say virus, does it classify pollutants as a virus? Transmission of the virus. And then the lawyer will say, well, you brought virus into my property, and you say, yes, well, no one got sick. And then the lawyers fight it out. They make a pile of money, and we're left wondering, what are we going to do? Are we liable or not? Exclusions include contaminants, communicable disease. Some policies specifically exclude sickness or death, and some policies actually provide coverage for sickness or death, but then they'll exclude contaminants. So going back to what we said, what does the policy give you? What does it take away? What does it give you back? This is where it gets really complicated. And believe me, all of this will lead to a conclusion as we continue to ask these questions. Same thing with property damage. Contaminated properties can imply loss of use and loss of value, okay? Or even the presence of the virus in a community or a neighborhood. Can that imply loss of value? How did it happen? How did the loss of value allegedly happen? Was it neglect because you didn't take care of the property under your property management agreement? Was it a breach of contract? Was it because you ordered to shelter in place? And again, that question, does the presence of the virus constitute property damage? I think that's going to be ruled on behalf of the property owners. Generally, these types of rulings go on behalf of the general public and not necessarily on behalf of the professional involved. Which leads us to valuation. This is a really difficult issue right now. I think everybody knows that, Landy works with appraisers as well as real estate firms, and we work with mortgage brokers and so on. So we're seeing, a lot of different opinions on valuation and how it should be accomplished these days. So is the value, before we talked about loss of use, so now we'll talk about the value of the property diminished by the presence of a virus or a contamination. And how do you judge that? Either as an appraiser or as an agent trying to determine a fair selling price or a fair offer on a property. How is the presence of a virus affecting that valuation? Is an addendum to the offer or sales agreement warranted? have this conversation all the time about hold harmless agreements and waivers, and if they have any real value and can they hold up in court. And typically they don't have a lot of strength in court. They're easily overturned. On the other hand, they can be used to at least be informative to the person at the other end of that contract that says, hey, this is an issue. We want you to recognize it and sign off on it, that this is an issue, that perhaps the value of your property may be diminished by the presence of coronavirus, either in the property itself, someone who is sick on the property, whether it's a week ago or 6 months ago. Because remember, I mean, we're dealing with a crisis right now. I talked about safety and health for the immediate concern, but what's going to happen in 6 months when maybe the crisis has diminished, but then you still have to go and represent these properties where the presence of the virus existed. The appraisers are trying to use waivers or addendums on the appraisals, recognizing that they can't judge the value of a property based on the potential impact of COVID-19. Maybe the folks at South Shore that are listening might have a better answer for me, because I'm not sure if MAR has provided any blanket language for that on your sales agreements. For those people with insurance that has a legal hotline, it's a good question to ask your insurance company and your legal hotline about maybe developing some language for an addendum if you're concerned about value and future value. Especially after the agreement has been signed and the loan has been approved, is the loan the conditions of the loan affected by a diminished value or possible diminished value of the property? Does the down payment change? Does mortgage insurance now apply? I mean, there's a lot of consequences of changing in value after or during the process of negotiating and signing the contract, the sales contracts, and the loan agreements. So hopefully everyone is familiar with the new guidance from FHFA and the Veterans Administrations on interior appraisals. If not, please seek that out. It's everywhere on the internet. It's really good information about what the expectations are for the appraisers. And basically, they're saying that an appraisal can be done with no interior inspection in almost all cases. And which is good news for the appraisers, except that a lot of the lenders are not accepting that and still mandating interior in appraisals, which is, in my view, kind of crazy. There's a lot of ways to do this. You know, there's Skype and there's Facebook and there's drones, and I mean, there's just a lot of ways to do inspections these days without putting people in harm's way. But again, I'm not the lender. I'm not ordering the appraisals. So my discussion with both realtors, appraisers, and lenders is that there's still a lot of interior inspections being required. We'll see what happens with that over the next few days. But again, how does that affect future value? This is the one issue that a lot of business owners are asking about, and a lot of broker owners are asking about, which is the coverage feature in their BOP policies for business interruption and extra expense. Typically, this coverage is for direct physical loss, a fire or a vandalism, something that keeps the business from being able to operate and therefore gain income and revenue. So the general exclusions for that are economic downturns, civil authority. In other words, the state saying, hey, you can't open up your business. Even though you're essential workers, I think in Massachusetts, that means that you can't have you can't have people come to your office. You may be able to do other things. So, certainly there's civil authority that's impacting this. And then contamination from virus and bacteria, guess what is usually excluded. So in general, and we're seeing the carriers make very definitive statements that no, we're not covering business interruption and extra expense for loss due to either civil authority, presence of virus and contamination. They're making these really blanket, broad statements, definitive statements, citing policy language, which is their right to do. On the other hand, we have the states who are moving towards loosening up this language significantly. I'm not sure if Massachusetts is one of them right now, but I think it will be. In other words, the state is legislating or regulating insurance companies to broaden their policy language to include coverage for virus and bacteria or loss due to a civil direction. How that plays out over time is yet to be seen, because I don't think any state has actually been able to enact that, but I know that there's a lot of movement in that direction. And again, I think over the next couple of days, you're going to see all of this kind of hit the fan, so to speak. And so policy owners should look at their policy and see what's happening in their state and what their policy is saying, because there may be in the future coverage for business interruption where right now it's excluded. Okay, and then the argument is going to be, well, how does that impact real estate sales, which aren't dependent on a physical office? I mean, we're all doing this out of our houses right now, right? We don't have to go into the office to conduct business. So again, messy stuff. Trying to make you aware of it. Don't kill the messenger. All of this stuff will be resolved, and it is very much a day-to-day type of process where we're seeing changes and orders and so on. So moving on, if we could, please. As I mentioned at the beginning, workers' comp is usually not an issue. It's pretty cut and dry, you know, what it applies to. In Massachusetts, independent contractor agents are exempt from workers' compensation. I think there are very few broker owners who cover independent contractors under their workers' comp policies. But employees certainly need to. And workers' comp, by the way, you know, just as a quick refresher, protects the employee if the employee is injured or hurt or dies while working for the employer. Okay, so now what happens if the employer says, no, you have to go do that. You have to go do that showing. You know, you have to hold the open house. You know, where's the liability there? You have to go and meet with that client. Where's, you know, does that liability really increase? Because in this case, things like viruses and contamination and communicable disease are not excluded. Those things are all covered under workers' compensation. So the broker owner can, you know, increase their liability significantly, instructing employees to do certain things. How does that impact independent contractors? Somebody is going to make the play that even though I'm an independent contractor, I should be covered under the workers' compensation policy. Excuse me. And you're going back to court. And what does that mean? It means that on a larger picture, the independent contractor status of real estate agents is going to be questioned. This is going to be an unintended consequence of COVID-19 and how it's litigated. But I would really keep an eye on this, how this develops over, you know, the next many months as an agent, rightfully or wrongfully, is going to challenge the workers' compensation laws and therefore open up the broader question of what's an independent contractor. So fun stuff coming up, folks. And we'll move on to the next slide. Everybody hates when I talk about cybercrime. It's worse now than it was a few weeks ago. The hackers, the cybercrime people, are registering thousands of new domains using the coronavirus terms. And if you haven't started receiving emails or even phone calls about, you know, coronavirus update, COVID-19 information, protect yourself, you know, whatever it is, you're going to get them like really soon. I've been seeing them already, and they're pretty easy to spot if you know what you're looking for, because really the only people you should trust about these types of messages should be your local and state government, your realtor association, your insurance company, and your lawyer. And if you have medical concerns, certainly anything else that you see coming in this direction from you is either phishing, spam, or somebody trying to make a buck off you. So you got to be really careful with this. Now, what happens with staff working at home? Okay, real estate agents are typically used to working at home. Office staff is not. Extending this conversation beyond, your traditional real estate office, people working at home who are not used to working at home could be relaxing your office protocols. They can be not using the security methods that are present in your home. They may be using their home computers to access company data and information or communicate with clients or other professionals. So the risk of cybercrime has, like everything else, unfortunately with COVID-19, increased exponentially. The insurance companies, again, are taking positions on this, whether there's coverage for use of home computers and so on. So I would encourage those who are working at home and those who are directing others to work at home to make sure that the protocols, the security protocols that you set up are still in place. If at all possible, avoid use of home computers and use a company issued computer, iPad, phone, whatever it is, to make sure that not only some of the security methods are there, but there's no issues around insurance coverage. Again, another developing issue. The insurance company is going to try to protect themselves. Let's be honest here. If they charge you $1,000 for a policy, that covers X, Y, and Z, they're basing that on actuarial numbers that they've run for the certain risks that they want to insure. If the government says, no, you're going to insure all of this more, well, the insurance company never charged you for that. I'm not sure what just happened. Are you there? Can you hear me?
John, you're good. We can all still hear you and see you.
Okay, that's good, because I can hear you, but I can't see my own slideshow.
Okay,
So
I'm gonna pull it right back up again. I just had to stop it so I could unmute myself.
okay.
1 second.
Let's see what happens here, folks. It's a thrill a minute. Talk about cybercrime. Everybody just got to look at my email. How about that? Yes, no?
John, can you see it when I have it on? Like, right, I just had it up. Did you see it?
I cannot. No, I do not see it. Okay. I do not see it. You want me to try to log in again?
I think it was just going into the questions anyways.
Okay.
And I think that I think everyone else was able to see it too, so you should be okay.
Okay. All right. I think we kind of got to the end. Was there anything else after the cybercrime? Stephanie, any of the slides?
Let me see here. Nope, it was just the questions and then your biography.
All right. So does anyone have questions? Everybody's too scared.
Let's see. People, if you want to type some questions into the chat box, you absolutely can. Okay. It's a little bubble on the bottom that says chat.
I know that while anybody's doing that, MAR issued some directive, I shouldn't say directive, guidance, either last night or this morning about open houses, that while open houses are still permitted, that they strongly advise you to not conduct an open house. I would concur with that. For everybody's safety, forget liability. contamination of that might lead to a lawsuit or an insurance claim. I just think, there's not any reason to conduct an open house these days. If someone's intent on buying or seeing a property, and I do see that there's activity going on, people are telling me that there is, I see it on LinkedIn and so on. A lot of this stuff can just be done virtually. The homeowner can walk through their property with their phone or their iPad and FaceTime it or Skype it. And I think everybody can get this, pretty good view of what the property is like. Same thing with showings. With showings, you don't have care, custody, and control of the property. But again, why risk, bringing in another person into an environment where they could be contaminated, they can contaminate someone else, or frankly, you can contaminate someone else to become contaminated. Just doesn't make, a lot of sense. I recognize income is at stake here. I'm not trying to be cavalier about it in any way. I think that we're all looking at alternate ways of doing business. My business has been affected, certainly, and a lot of other people's business has been. So we're learning to do it in a different way and learning to adapt in a different way. And I think, we're all trying to do that while avoiding contact with each other using social distancing. Are there any questions, Marie?
John, just a couple of things about the open house. MAR is, even though we're essential employees, MAR is encouraging everybody to do everything virtually, which you covered. What are some of the things that the insurance companies, could they go back into some of the policies and make adjustments for the COVID-19, or are you going to have to take out new policies? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, honestly, I think it's the exact thing is going to happen. The exact opposite thing is going to happen. And then I think what the question is implying, the insurance companies are not going to broaden language. They're not all of a sudden going to say, oh yeah, we're going to cover viruses, unless they mandated to by a particular state. Okay. In fact, we're seeing some of the opposite where, some policies that might not have specifically excluded communicable disease, new policies that are being issued do have endorsements excluding communicable disease. So, we're seeing kind of a circling of the wagon, so to speak, on behalf of the insurance companies where they're not going to broaden language. Maybe they're not going to restrict it. In some cases, they are putting more restrictive language. But unless the states tell them, then we're not going to see much. Now, one area that I do see insurance companies opening up language for, and this is a good thing, it impacts real estate agents for sure. It impacts title attorneys and real estate attorneys who have to witness and sign off. And in many cases, policies for real estate firms also cover notary services. Some of these policies require an in-person witnessing for coverage to be in place. And everyone, I think, knows that in Massachusetts, closings need to be in person. There needs to be in-person witnessing, and that was a move to protect the attorneys, protect the clients too from some potential virtual shenanigans. But I know that the Real Estate Bar Association in the state of Massachusetts are working to change that legislation where virtual witnessing is now acceptable and legal in Massachusetts. Hasn't been done yet. There's probably maybe about 15 states right now who have changed their laws to allow virtual witnessing. So that's a good thing. Now, getting back to insurance, what I was saying, the insurance companies are now liberalizing their language that says any type of witnessing, including virtual witnessing, e-notifications, e-witnessing, whatever you want to call it, is now covered. So there's one example where insurance is expanding language on behalf of the policyholder. So that's a really good thing. It keeps commerce going, because if in Massachusetts the law doesn't change and you can only have a closing with an in-person witness, well, we know what's going to happen. So keep an eye on what's happening with mass legislation on in-person versus e-witnessing. If anyone out there is providing notary services, read your policy to see if in-person witnessing is required or not. So hopefully that answers that question a little bit. Again, day to day, watch what's happening with REVA, tune into REVA and the Real Estate Bar Association and the mass legislation on in-person witnessing.
We have another question. Do you see our E&O policy language changing or the premiums increasing?
I don't see the language really changing because it's pretty cut and dry right now that a lot of this is excluded. And it's really difficult for insurance companies to just change language. They can change their interpretation of their language, but it's hard for them to change language because they have to go through insurance commissioners. So I don't see a lot of big changes coming with language in contracts per se. In terms of pricing, that's hard to say. If the insurance companies are mandated into covering COVID-19 illnesses and property loss and so on when they never planned to and start paying out claims, which you can imagine are probably going to be pretty big claims, how is that going to impact future premiums? Well, it may. But I think that the insurance industry is, as a whole, pretty solid and will be able to withstand what happens here. So I don't see, big changes on either one of those fronts. Again, who knows? Right now, we're all in the shelter safety mode, and none of this stuff is going to court yet, or very little of it has gone to court yet. So there's a lot to be found out in future months.
We have no more questions.
Okay. Well, everyone, thank you for listening. I know I asked more questions than I provided answers for, but that's where we're at these days. Please stay safe. And I think my slide is up there. Please reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions, opine on certain things if we have time to do that. And, certainly you don't need to be a Landy client to reach out to me for any questions. We're not honestly too interested in selling insurance these days as we are in making sure everybody's safe. So take care of yourselves and your families, and look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much.
John, thank you so much for helping us and have this webinar up. And thank you again for being a gold sponsor for South Shore Realtors. And thank you everybody who came to attend today. We'll get this recording out to you guys just as soon as it comes through. And I'm going to put up his bio just so everyone has his information. John, thank you again. This was wonderful.
All right. Thanks so much. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.